Have you ever been deeply desired, and still felt completely empty? Most people believe that desire is proof of worth, that being wanted is the highest form of validation. We scroll, swipe, and seduce just to be seen. But what happens when the body no longer responds? When touch doesn't thrill? When the hunger fades, and all that's left is silence? This is the moment no one prepares you for, the quiet collapse that follows years of chasing something you were told would make you whole. It's not burnout. It's not frigidity. It's not failure. It's the beginning. You see, there's a sacred threshold few women cross, the place where desire loses its power and something far more ancient stirs beneath the surface. For some, it comes after heartbreak. For others, after countless nights where even pleasure feels performative. And then one day, without warning, the body simply stops reaching. You stop chasing. You stop waiting for the next touch, the next text, the next pair of eyes to find you desirable. And that's when the real panic sets in. Because no one ever tells you that when desire dies, it drags your identity with it. Who are you if you're not being wanted? If no one longs for you? For years, you equated desire with being alive. You danced in its fire, mistaking attention for love and chemistry for connection. But now the fire's gone cold. You find yourself avoiding intimacy, not because you're broken, but because you're awakening. The world will call it abstinence. A phase. A dryness. But Carl Jung would call it the moment the unconscious begins to speak. When the external world no longer stimulates, the soul finally has room to breathe. That's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. And yet, it's terrifying. Your friends ask why you're withdrawing. Your family wonders if you're depressed. Your past lovers think you're hiding. But you're not hiding. You're shedding. Because there's something you're starting to realize. You've been trading your essence for validation. Giving away pieces of yourself just to be held, seen, desired. You've confused hunger with connection. But now your hunger is gone, and the clarity is brutal. In the silence, you begin to hear it, that soft pulse within. A presence you'd forgotten. A longing that has no object. Not for a man. Not for sex. Not for a warm body beside you. But for something nameless. Something that feels like home. This isn't celibacy. This isn't rejection. This is a return. A return to the self. And it begins, strangely, with the body. The same body that once craved closeness now craves solitude. The same skin that once tingled under another's touch now longs to be untouched. Because your body is no longer seeking pleasure, it's seeking purity. A kind of energetic reset. A cleansing. And with that cleansing comes grief. Yes, grief. For the years you spent trying to be loved the way the movies told you love should look. For the way you bent yourself to fit his hands, his needs, his timing. For every time you said yes when your soul screamed no. In the space where desire once ruled, memory floods in. Old patterns reveal themselves. The choices you thought were yours, suddenly you see they were survival. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe you've stopped moving not because you're stuck, but because you're finally becoming aware. This silence is sacred. This stillness is not a void. It is the womb of rebirth. The body is no longer a tool for transaction. It is now a vessel for transformation. But the world won't understand. They'll ask, don't you miss it? Don't you feel alone? And your answer will be hard to explain. Because no, you don't miss being desired. You miss being known. And no, you're not alone. You're becoming. There is a stillness that isn't apathy. There is a quiet that doesn't mean emptiness. There is an abstinence that isn't lack, but choice. The beginning of true power is not in being chased, but in choosing to no longer run. And as that realization lands, something shifts in you. A softness returns. A presence emerges. You sit with yourself and for the first time in years, you don't want to escape. You realize, It wasn't men you were avoiding. It was yourself you were trying to find. And now, she's here. Waiting. Listening. Whispering. And she will not be satisfied with surface ever again. They tell you that abstinence is unnatural, that it's a denial of your femininity, that something must be wrong with you if you don't crave touch, if you don't ache for intimacy. And so you question yourself. Late at night, you lie in bed not yearning for someone's arms but for answers. Why has the fire dimmed? Why does the idea of closeness feel more like a weight than a warmth? You scroll past images of perfect couples, public affection, romantic captions. None of it stirs you. You begin to wonder, am I numb? Broken? Or worse, invisible? This is where the real battle begins. Not against the world, but within. Because while the body may be quiet, the mind screams. It hurls every narrative you've been taught since you were old enough to feel. A woman is to be wanted. A woman without desire is wasted. A woman who withdraws is failing. These voices aren't yours, but they sound like you. They sound like your mother's warnings, your friends' concerns, your ex-lover's accusations. You've internalized them so deeply, you can't tell where they end and you begin. This is the war between your programming and your soul. Between what the world expects you to be, and what your essence longs to become. Jung called it the confrontation with the shadow. It is the most painful phase of becoming. Because now you see everything you once suppressed rising to the surface. Your need to be chosen. Your addiction to validation. Your tendency to perform, to seduce, to earn love through sacrifice. None of this was love. It was survival. And now that you're no longer surviving, these patterns begin to feel foreign. You look back at who you've been, not with shame, but with clarity. And clarity hurts. It's sharp. It slices through your self-image, your romantic illusions, your stories about what love is supposed to be. You begin to notice how much of your past was reaction, not intention. You didn't choose most of it. You inherited it. You adapted. You became what you thought you needed to be in order to be wanted. And now, stripped of desire, stripped of need, you are naked. Not physically. Existentially. Emotionally. Spiritually. You stand in front of yourself, no longer adorned in longing, no longer veiled in seduction. Just you. And it's terrifying. Because for so long, desire gave you a role. It made you relevant. It gave you a script. Without it, there's only space. And in that space, you face the one thing you've avoided most, your essence. You begin to feel emotions that have no name. A kind of sadness that isn't rooted in loss. A kind of ache that isn't physical. It's the grief of rebirth. Of losing the woman you pretended to be. Of watching her die quietly, without applause. No one sees this transformation. It happens in silence. In solitude. In the pause between longing and liberation. But you feel it. Every cell in your body knows. You are no longer who you were, and not yet who you're becoming. This is the threshold. The dark hallway of awakening. There are no signs. No hand to hold. Just the echo of your own footsteps. And still, you walk. Rough attraction. Something deeper holds you back. It's not fear. It's not trauma. It's instinct. A quiet, ancient knowing that says, not yet. Not like this. You're beginning to recognize how much you've mistaken external intimacy for internal connection. You remember all the times you said yes to closeness while your soul whispered no. How many nights did you lie beside someone whose body warmed you, but whose presence left you cold? How many times did you trade pieces of yourself in the name of chemistry, only to be left emptier than before? No one tells you that abstinence isn't just about the body. It's about detoxing your entire system from the illusion that someone else can complete you. And now, without the noise of desire clouding your vision, you start to see. You see how often you performed, smiling when you were tired, pretending to want when you didn't, laughing just to fill the silence. You see how you used sexuality as currency to buy closeness, How you let yourself be touched by people who never truly saw you. And it hurts. Not because you were wrong, but because you were unconscious. You were surviving in a system that taught you love is earned, not given. You were trained to seduce before you were taught to be seen. And now that the spell is broken, the grief is overwhelming. Not just grief for lost love, but grief for lost years. For how long you abandoned yourself while chasing someone else. For how deeply you misunderstood what your soul actually needed. But this grief is sacred. It is the fire that burns away the false self. It is the doorway to truth. Because in the absence of pleasure, something more profound arrives, presence. For the first time, you're not seeking. You're sitting. You're witnessing yourself in real time, without the need to be desired, without the urge to escape. And what you discover there is radical. There's stillness, and in that stillness, power. Not the loud, performative kind. The quiet kind. The rooted kind. The kind of power that doesn't beg to be chosen, because it already chose itself. Jung said that only by going inward can we reclaim the projections we cast onto others. And that's exactly what you're doing now. You're taking back every part of yourself you once gave away. Your worth. Your sensuality. Your silence. You're realizing that abstinence is not a lack of connection, it's the beginning of real connection. And that's what terrifies people the most. Because a woman who no longer relies on desire to feel alive is untouchable. Not because she can't be reached, but because she can no longer be manipulated. She doesn't need validation. She is her own witness, her own warmth, her own mirror. And when you become that woman, when you sit in your solitude not with despair but with reverence, something opens. A door within the soul. A voice begins to rise. Not loud, not dramatic, but firm, ancient, yours. And it whispers, this is who you are. Not the lover, not the seductress, not the muse, not the wife, just you. And for the first time, that's enough. There comes a moment when the noise of the world becomes unbearable. Not because it's louder, but because you've become quieter. You begin to withdraw, not out of sadness, not out of anger, but out of necessity. You cancel plans. You stop replying as fast. You leave messages on read. Your silence becomes a mirror, and suddenly, you realize how many people were only interested in your noise, your availability, your energy to entertain or comfort them. The moment you no longer give that freely, they disappear. And for a while, that hurts. Not because you miss them, but because you finally see them. You see what was real and what was borrowed. You see how much of your life was built around being needed, being available, being chosen. And now, in your sacred silence, you choose differently. You don't need noise to feel alive. You don't need attention to feel affirmed. You don't need someone else's desire to feel beautiful. This is the beginning of the sacred withdrawal, a phase that terrifies most, because it requires you to step away from the roles that once defined you. You are no longer the caretaker, no longer the flirt, no longer the emotional anchor for people who refuse to hold themselves. And without those identities, you feel lost. Who are you if no one is looking? Who are you if you're not performing? These are not questions of weakness, they are rites of passage. Jung believed that withdrawal is a necessary container for individuation. The soul cannot evolve while it's being constantly stimulated, distracted, and defined by others. So you go quiet. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your distance. You no longer owe access to anyone. And in that sacred boundary, something wild begins to awaken. Not the wild that's reckless or loud, but the archetype of the wild woman, untamed, intuitive, deeply rooted in her own rhythm. She doesn't seek, she attracts. She doesn't chase, she creates space. She doesn't beg, she becomes. This woman has always lived inside you, but she couldn't emerge while you were still clinging to old roles, to old definitions of love. She is not impressed by admiration. She is not moved by charm. She does not play games. And as you spend more time alone, in your own body, in your own energy, you begin to hear her voice. It doesn't sound like confidence. It sounds like truth. And it says, let it all fall away. If it needs you to be small, you don't need it. If it only loves your mask, it will never hold your soul. So you start cleaning house, not just physically, but energetically. You unfollow. You uninstall. You say no without guilt. You stop pretending you're okay just to keep others comfortable. And every time you choose yourself, something inside clicks into place. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. But it's undeniable. You are no longer a woman surviving off crumbs of affection. You are becoming the woman who sets the table. And only those who bring reverence will be allowed to sit. As the days pass in solitude, something unexpected begins to happen. You stop craving noise. You stop reaching for distractions that once numbed you. The impulse to scroll endlessly, to reply instantly, to keep yourself busy, begins to dissolve. There's a strange stillness that settles into your bones. And though it feels foreign at first, there's something comforting about it, something ancient. You start noticing things you never had space to feel. The weight of your breath. The shape of your own thoughts. The grief that's been hiding beneath your need to always be okay. This is what most people run from. Not pain, but clarity. Because clarity demands change. And change demands death. Not literal, but symbolic. The death of who you thought you had to be. The death of the persona you wore to survive. Jung called this the shedding of the false self, a necessary collapse so the real self can emerge. And so you collapse. Quietly. Privately. There is no dramatic breakdown, no chaos. Just undoing. You stop pretending to be strong for others. You cry, not because something bad happened, but because you finally feel safe enough to release what you've held for too long. You're no longer being touched, and yet, you've never been more connected to your own body. You're no longer being seen, and yet, you feel more visible to yourself than ever before. You begin to realize that the validation you sought outside was never designed to last. It always required a performance, a mask, a sacrifice. And now that you've stopped performing, you feel both liberated and lost. But mostly, you feel real. And in that realness, something grows. At first, it's subtle. A flicker. A whisper. A tug deep in your gut. But then it becomes undeniable. Your intuition is returning. Not the loud, anxious voice of fear masquerading as instinct. But the quiet certainty of inner knowing. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop outsourcing decisions. You no longer need 10 opinions before you act. You feel what's right in your bones, and you follow it. That's the power of withdrawal. It strips away the noise until only your truth remains. And that truth doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply is. You start honoring your rhythms. You sleep when you're tired. You say no when something feels off. You stop forcing connections. You stop answering energy that feels hollow. You walk away from conversations that don't nourish. You no longer feel guilty for choosing your peace over their comfort. And in doing so, you discover something radical. You are enough without the roles. Without the romance. Without the attention. Without the affirmation. Just you, raw, quiet, whole. You no longer dress for the gaze of others. You dress for the ritual of self-respect. You don't wear lipstick for validation. You wear it because it makes you feel like a queen at the altar of your own becoming. Even the way you move changes. You're no longer rushing, proving, chasing. You're rooted, deliberate. You take up space, not to dominate, but to exist fully. And that is revolutionary in a world that profits off your self-doubt. You are no longer consumable. You are becoming sacred. There's a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you realize you no longer miss what you thought you needed. The messages, the touches, the late-night validation, they no longer carry the same weight. What once felt like oxygen now feels like noise. And instead of feeling empty without it, you feel full. Full of your own presence. Full of your own energy. This is not isolation. This is sacred solitude. The kind Jung wrote about, the fertile ground where the soul begins to speak. For the first time, you are not filling space to avoid yourself. You are holding space to meet yourself. And what you find there is not weak. She is not desperate. She is not lost. She is wild and wise and waiting. She is the version of you that never needed approval to exist. She is the you that existed before the world told you who to be. And as you sit with her more often, in silence, in stillness, in honest reflection, your entire nervous system begins to shift. There is less urgency, less proving, less contortion. You no longer feel the need to be liked by everyone, or loved by someone, to feel worthy. Because you no longer feel like a woman waiting. You are a woman arriving. Arriving into herself. Into her own wholeness. Into her own timing. This arrival isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause. It comes in the way you walk through your day, with presence. In the way you drink your coffee slowly, dress intentionally, move gracefully, not to be seen, but to be felt. And even if no one else notices, you do. And that noticing is everything. That awareness is the beginning of self-devotion. Not self-care. Not surface rituals. But radical reverence for your own existence. The kind of reverence that no longer accepts crumbs. That no longer entertains half-hearted affection or performative love. You're not angry at your past. You're grateful. It taught you what pretending feels like. So you can now fully embody what truth feels like. You're no longer ashamed of your silence. You wear it like armor. You walk with it like a queen moves through ancient halls. Not defensive. Not withdrawn. But deliberate. Sovereign. Whole. And when people from your past try to re-enter, offering fragments, distractions, or comfort dressed as connection, you no longer flinch. You see clearly now. You're not above them. You've just gone deeper. And that depth demands a different kind of exchange. One rooted in presence, in truth, in soul. Because you now know what it costs to abandon yourself. And you will not pay that price again. So you stay. With yourself. In the silence. In the mystery. In the becoming. And in that staying, you begin to hear it. That sacred whisper beneath the noise of the world. I've been waiting for you. It doesn't announce itself. The shadow never does. It arrives quietly, woven into thoughts that disturb, memories that resurface without warning, emotions that make no sense. You wake up one morning and feel the weight of something nameless pressing against your chest. Not sadness. Not anxiety. Something older. Something deeper. A sense that something inside you is watching. Not judging, but waiting. This is how the shadow greets you. Jung said that the shadow is everything you refuse to see about yourself. But what he didn't say, at least not out loud, is that confronting it can feel like death. Because in many ways, it is. The death of denial. The death of illusion. The death of who you thought you were. At first, you resist. Of course you do. You try to return to old habits, old identities. You open the door to distraction again, just a little. You flirt with an old flame. You respond to someone who never saw you. You scroll through attention like it's oxygen. But something's changed. The high doesn't hit. The old games feel empty. The energy exchange feels toxic in your body. And that's when the panic sets in. Because you realize, you can't go back. Not fully. Not honestly. You've already seen too much. You've already come too far. This is the unraveling. You feel detached from the world, but not quite home within yourself. A liminal space. A no woman's land. Friends start to seem foreign. Laughter feels forced. Small talk is unbearable. You crave depth like hunger. But not just with others, with yourself. You want to know, why do I sabotage love? Why do I shrink when I'm seen? Why do I attract pain and call it passion? These are not casual questions. These are keys. And every one of them unlocks a room you've been afraid to enter. Rooms filled with truths you've buried. How often you've betrayed yourself just to be loved. How many times you said yes when your whole body said no. How you learned to perform softness to survive. How you confused being desired with being safe. The shadow doesn't yell these things at you. It whispers them in moments of stillness. And each time you hear it, you flinch, not because it's wrong, but because it's right. And you're not ready. But readiness doesn't matter anymore. The door is open. And once the shadow is seen, it will not go unseen. So you begin the descent, not into darkness, but into truth. A kind of sacred darkness. The kind where you're not blind, but finally able to see without distraction. There is a terrifying clarity that comes with facing your shadow. Because now, it no longer hides in the corners. It sits with you. It breathes with you. You hear it when you speak, catching yourself mid-sentence, realizing you've said something that wasn't truth, but habit. You see it in your patterns, how you pull away when someone gets too close, how you chase what hurts you, how you stay silent to avoid conflict, even when your soul is screaming. The shadow is not evil. It's misunderstood. It is the collection of everything you were told was too much, too emotional, too needy, too intense. It is the part of you that had to be buried to survive childhood, relationships, religion, society. And now it's surfacing, not to destroy you, but to finally be acknowledged. But acknowledgement is not easy. It's not a meditation or a journal prompt. It's raw. It's brutal. You look in the mirror and see the ways you've manipulated, the ways you've lied, the ways you've abandoned yourself and then blamed others for it. You begin to recognize your role in your own suffering. Not as a way to take the blame, but as a way to reclaim power. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Your shadow is not trying to shame you. It's trying to free you. But it has to show you everything first. Every unhealed wound. Every repressed scream. Every time you tolerated less than you deserved and called it love. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts. You cry in ways you've never cried before. From your belly. From your bones. You don't even know what you're grieving anymore, only that you are. And in that grief, you begin to unravel. Not collapse, but open. Because for the first time, you're not resisting. You're letting the pain move. And in doing so, something incredible happens. Compassion arrives. Not pity. Not victimhood. But fierce, clear compassion. For the version of you that did the best she could with what she had. For the girl who only knew how to love by disappearing. For the woman who built her identity around being wanted, because she didn't yet know she was already whole. This compassion is not weak. It's powerful. It softens the judgment. It makes space for the truth to settle without shame. You stop needing to justify your past. You stop needing to make villains out of ex-lovers. You stop rehearsing your pain like a monologue. Because now, you're speaking to something deeper. A part of you that was never wounded, only waiting. And that part doesn't want revenge. It wants integration. It wants wholeness. The shadow doesn't ask you to fix yourself. It asks you to hold yourself, to stop running from the rage, the grief, the longing. To sit in the fire and know that it will not consume you. It will refine you. And so, you stay. You no longer try to numb. You no longer try to prove. You no longer try to be good. You just try to be real. And in that choice, the alchemy begins. And then, almost without realizing it, you stop flinching when the shadow shows up. You no longer brace yourself for shame or recoil in self-judgment. You begin to greet it like an old friend, not because it's pleasant, but because it's honest. You've stopped fearing your darkness. Because now you understand, it was never darkness at all, it was light, waiting to be reclaimed. The shadow, in its truest form, is just truth unspoken, desire unexpressed, grief unprocessed, anger unexplored. It's the sacred material of your becoming, locked away behind the masks you were forced to wear. And now that the masks are off, you can finally see yourself, not as broken, not as too much, but as whole. Messy, complex, luminous, whole. This is where true power begins. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that radiates from the core. The power of the woman who knows her shadow, who has danced in her own fire and survived, who has cried until her lungs collapsed and still chose to stay, who has faced her deepest wounds without asking anyone to rescue her. That woman is not fragile. She is forged. And the world doesn't quite know what to do with her. Because she's not easy to impress anymore. She doesn't bite the bait of flattery or fall for hollow affection. She sees the emptiness in charm and the danger in emotional crumbs. She is not bitter. She is boundaried. And her boundaries aren't walls, they are gates. Only those who come with truth will ever get through. There is a calmness to her now. A quiet certainty. Not because life is perfect, but because she no longer needs it to be. She's not performing. She's not begging. She's not proving. She is. That's it. She is. And in that being, there is freedom. A freedom that can't be sold. A freedom that comes only when you faced yourself in the mirror of your own silence and didn't look away. Jung called this the integration of the self. The moment when all your fragmented parts, light, shadow, sacred, wounded, are finally brought back into the same room. No longer fighting. No longer hidden. Just returned. You don't become someone new. You become fully who you've always been. And it doesn't happen in a rush. It doesn't come with fireworks or fanfare. It happens in the smallest, quietest moments. When you say no and don't explain. When you cry without needing to be fixed. When you walk away from comfort because it costs your soul. When you forgive, not to excuse, but to unchain yourself. When you stop needing to be chosen, and start choosing yourself again and again and again. This is what it means to meet your shadow, not to defeat it but to integrate it. To sit at the table with all of who you are, and say, you belong here. Even the parts you once hated. Even the memories you tried to forget. Even the flaws that made you feel unlovable. Because now, you see, they are not flaws. They are fingerprints. Evidence of your humanity. And that humanity is divine. What was once your darkness has become your depth. What was once your shame has become your strength. And what was once your silence is now your truth. It doesn't happen all at once. Rebirth never does. It's not a single sunrise or a sudden shift. It's a series of quiet moments where you begin to notice that you're no longer reacting the way you used to. You read an old message and feel nothing. You see someone who once shattered you, and your body stays calm. You catch yourself smiling for no reason, no one watching, no performance, just peace. This is how transformation begins, not loudly, but deeply. After you've danced with your shadow and sat with your wounds long enough to hear what they were really trying to say. And now, something in you has changed, not just emotionally, but energetically. You walk differently. Not because you're trying to be confident, but because your soul is no longer hiding. There's no more split. No more pretending. No more shape-shifting to fit into rooms that were never meant to hold you. Now, you walk into a space and bring your own light. Not to prove anything. Just because it's who you are. This is what happens when a woman returns to herself. The world feels it, even if it can't name it. Some will be drawn to you like gravity. Others will be repelled. Not because you've become cruel or distant, but because you no longer play small to make them comfortable. You no longer shrink to be palatable. You no longer accept crumbs and call it love. Your standards aren't higher, they're clearer. And those who once fit into your life now rattle against the boundaries of your truth. You don't blame them. You don't beg them. You just bless them and release them. Because now you understand, not everyone is meant to walk with you beyond the threshold of your own transformation. Some were only meant to accompany your pain, not your becoming. And that's okay. You're no longer holding on out of fear. You're no longer tolerating energy that disturbs your peace just to avoid being alone. Because you are no longer afraid of solitude. You've made it your sanctuary, your temple, your truth. And in that space, something beautiful has taken root: discernment. You can feel what's real, what's honest, what's aligned. You can tell when someone's presence is peace or performance. You no longer chase clarity. You are clarity. And your life begins to reflect that. The way you speak, the way you choose, the way you rest, the way you walk away. Everything now flows from a place of alignment, not urgency, not scarcity. You've stepped out of the cycle of proving. You no longer audition for love. You are love. And the way you love now, it's different. It's no longer desperate. It's no longer transactional. It doesn't come from hunger. It comes from overflow. There comes a moment when even silence begins to sound different. It's no longer an escape or a shield, it's a frequency. A sacred resonance that you've tuned your entire being to. The woman you've become doesn't need to speak loudly to be heard. Her presence says what words cannot. Her energy precedes her. And not because she's trying, but because she's aligned. Fully. Finally. This alignment touches everything. The way she breathes, the way she eats, the way she says no without apology, and yes without hesitation. She no longer moves from obligation, she moves from truth. And that truth is not harsh. It's not cold. It's warm. Rooted. Unshakable. You can feel it in her eyes. In her stillness. In her refusal to be rushed, controlled, or distracted. She no longer carries the weight of needing to be understood. She understands herself. And that's enough. And so, the world begins to shift around her. Not because it changes, but because she now sees it through different eyes. What once felt like rejection now feels like redirection. What once triggered fear now invites curiosity. What once looked like loneliness now feels like sacred space. She begins to attract differently. Not because she's playing games, but because her energy is no longer fragmented. She no longer sends mixed signals to the universe. She's clear. And clarity is magnetic. The people who show up now, they don't come to take. They come to meet her. Eye to eye. Soul to soul. She doesn't beg to be chosen. She chooses. From a place of wholeness, not hunger. From discernment, not desperation. And love, when it comes, doesn't shake her foundation. It expands it. Because she's not waiting to be rescued. She's already saved herself. The woman she is now doesn't fall in love to escape her life. She invites love into a life she already loves. She doesn't confuse passion with possession. She doesn't mistake control for security. She doesn't lose herself in another. She meets them as an equal. Fully rooted. Fully expressed. Fully sovereign. And if love doesn't meet her in that space, she's not afraid to walk away. Not from bitterness, but from wisdom. Because she knows, peace is not negotiable. And presence is not replaceable. She no longer sees herself as someone who needs fixing. She is not on a path of self-improvement, she is on a path of self-remembrance. Everything she was seeking was never out there. It was always within. Covered by layers of performance, fear, and forgetting. But now, she remembers. Who she is. What she carries. Why she came. This is what it means to be reborn. Not to become someone new, but to return to the one you were before the world told you who to be. And from this place, her life becomes sacred. Every breath a ritual. Every step a prayer. Every boundary an act of devotion. She is no longer available for anything less than truth. Not because she's closed, but because she's clear. Not because she's guarded, but because she's free. And that freedom, it's untouchable. Not because no one can reach her, but because no one can move her unless they meet her where she already stands, in truth, in presence, in soul. If you've made it here, something in you has already begun to awaken. Maybe it was subtle. A pause in your breath. A memory you didn't expect. A feeling you couldn't name. Maybe you didn't even realize you were searching, until now. But the fact that you stayed, that you listened, not just with your ears, but with your soul, means something has already shifted. And no, it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. Like a key turning in a lock you didn't know existed. Like a door opening within you. Not out into the world, but inward, toward yourself. This isn't the end of the journey. This is the threshold. The moment where you choose, go back to what's familiar, or keep walking toward what's true. Not everyone will hear this calling. Not everyone is ready. But if you are, if something deep inside you is saying, this is me. This is where I am. This is what I've been waiting for. Then I invite you, don't turn away from it. Stay with it. Sit with it. Let it speak. And if you feel alone in it, remember this, what you're feeling right now, someone else is feeling too. Right now. Somewhere. In silence. In ache. In awakening. You are not alone. You never were. This is your becoming. And it is sacred. If this message found you at the right moment, if it reached into something wordless inside you, then share it. Not for likes. Not for numbers. But because every word in this video was a seed, and every soul it touches is soil. Let the ones who are still asleep hear this whisper through you. Leave a comment below. Tell us what stirred. Tell us what fell away. Tell us what you remembered. Because your voice might just be the sign someone else is waiting for. And if this is the space you've been longing for, one of truth, depth, and transformation, then stay close. Subscribe. Walk with us. We don't promise answers. But we promise presence. And sometimes, that's enough. Until next time, remember, there is nothing wrong with you for craving silence. For retreating. For healing. For choosing yourself. That's not weakness. That's revolution. And your soul knows it. She always has.